Hello, this is Brother East, Trains in Transit. Today I'm going to talk about the invention of the first viable means of propulsion for transit vehicles other than the horse and the steam locomotive. I'm talking specifically about the cable car, which basically stood between horse traction and the advent of electricity to power our transit vehicles. To begin with, our story starts in San Francisco, and we focus on the name of an inventor named Andrew Hallidie. You see, as I mentioned earlier, previous podcast, cities are concentrated or emanated from waterfronts, be it oceans or rivers, lakes, and so forth. That's where the people are concentrated. They come in through either boat or cross land. Now, in 1848-49, gold was struck in California. And the city of San Francisco, which had been like a sleepy town, a little viable village, suddenly exploded in population as people poured into it from its bay inland and the Pacific. The downtown region's population exploded in size. Now, unlike many areas, like by this time, New York had already had a viable mass transit system in the form of the horse car and so forth, and Philadelphia and Boston were soon to follow. New Orleans already had its St. Charles streetcar, which is still in existence, obviously. Vehicles were hauled along rails by horses, or in case of southern climates like Louisiana, mules. And even in San Francisco, public transit vehicles were hauled by horses and mules, but only to a certain point. Mark Street, the main thoroughfare, and other areas that were flat had these vehicles, and they did pretty well. Of course, like San Francisco, also initiated mass transit through small steam locomotives. And for a while, San Francisco was more tolerant of these than, let's say, in New York or Philadelphia or Boston. But even they got, just got fed up with the idea of engines exploding, the noise and the steam and the smoke and the pollutants of steam engines running through densely populated sections of the city. So they, of course, turned to the animal, horse, because there was nothing else viable. Well, the story has it that sometime in the late 1860s, thereabouts, Hallidie was going up a hill, was on a hillside in San Francisco, could have been knocked over wherever it was, and he saw a team of horses hauling up a streetcar, and the brakes in the vehicle gave way, and the car, the wooden vehicle, slid back down the hill to destruction. Not only were people injured, possibly killed, but the two horses hauling it were dragged down to their deaths. Hallidie witnessed this carnage, horses maimed, and either they weren't dead at the base of the hill, they were shortly killed. He looked at all the suffering of these animals, and he said, "There's got to be another viable way to traverse these hills." And electricity not being yet a viable option, and steam certainly out of the question, considering the grade of these things, he came up with a cable system that he originally thought of in relation to the first elevated line that I'd mentioned in a previous video invented by Charles Harvey, and he improved upon it. And what that did involved was laying a narrow trowel slit between two rails and having a steel cable in constant motion. And the vehicle would grab onto this cable and be hauled in one direction, uphill, downhill, and so forth, with brakes to stop it, to let people on or off. And the cables would be operated through a series of pulleys in the streets, pulleys that make the cable turn this direction or otherwise. And of course, the trick of the operator would be on a curve, so to either let the grip go and slide past it or go downhill in certain cases and apply the brakes. Anyway, the cable system was really quite, even though it was heavily involved mechanically, it was quite practical. And this is how it works. Worked then, this is how it works now. You have a cable car. This is a model of the Powell and Mason car still operating. And you have what they call a grip. These are the controls. These are the brakes, the grips. And the grip, the one here, is attached to this thing right here. It's this they call the grip, the handles rather. And this little device right here grabs the cable to set the cable car in motion. So I don't know if you can get a good view of it. Up close, let's say right there. And here, of course, in the rear are the brakes. So the layout of the street is like this. The track. You have the track, the silver rails, and you have slots for the grip to move. And the grip would be inserted in these slots. It's right here. So you have the cable car. I don't know if it's going to work on this model. Sometimes it's problematic. But anyway, this string right here represents the cable that runs under the street between the tracks. So Hallidie's idea was you'd have the car on this, and that grip would attach to the cable. And when he pressed the lever and he held it tight, the car would be set in motion, usually about 8 to 9 miles an hour. And this is how the cable systems cars operated then, and they operate today in San Francisco. Because San Francisco is the only viable place that still has them. So in order to stop, of course, the operator or the gripman would let go of the cable, apply the brakes, and he'd pick up passengers. Now, of course, in curves, he'd have to let it glide past to go up, down. He'd just have to, it takes a lot of work, and it's more complex, I guess, than I am qualified to say here. But this solved the problem of traction in San Francisco, and as a result, the city had a whole network of these things. And this idea expanded to other major areas such as New York, Boston. Well, I don't know if Boston had a cable system, but I'm not sure how extensive it was. I do know that Philadelphia and New York had a cable system. Brooklyn had one for a while. The city that made the widest use of the cable car was San Francisco, Chicago, and that came online in the early 1800s. And it was the cable network that established the loop. We talk about the loop in Chicago and associated with the elevated railroad, but the loop was actually one of the was part of the cable line system that was in place there. It would circle the downtown area, local downtown area, and that's what established the loop. It wasn't the L. The L came later. Now, of course, as was the case with Charles Harvey's system, which doomed the first L in New York, cables often break. They still do, or they get tangled. You'd have to have people go in and work on it. If the system goes down, everything stops all across the board. If there's a problem with the car house or the car barn, everything shuts down. I saw that, experienced that firsthand in 2021, when unfortunately there was a car barn fire that I didn't know about, nobody else did, but it brought the entire system to a halt. We were just stuck there, and to our great annoyance, didn't know what was going on for a while. But that's how it works. That was one of the major drawbacks. It was very mechanically involved, but it was still a lot more viable than the horse system, operated by 4 or 5 miles faster. But again, because it was so involved mechanically, it just didn't really, it was considered even then sort of a holdover setup, because in the 1870s, they were already beginning to talk about electric conversion and so forth. But that didn't really occur until Frank Sprague invented a system, overhead system, which we now have, where streetcars or trolleys could operate, get their power from. So that's pretty much it as far as the cable system. It was a transition. It was transitionary, and it did save untold number of lives, so untold number of horses who no longer had the labor going up and down those steep hills in San Francisco. So that alone, I think, in a lot of people's eyes, made it worth the conversion. Also, cable operating systems were cleaner, a lot quieter for the most part than horses, move faster. But even by the end of the 19th century, they were considered obsolete due to the advent of electricity. So there you have it for this one. Um, Future videos will discuss in detail. Probably the next video will probably discuss in detail the initial expansion of other modes of transport, namely the L, the subway, and so forth. But here we go. The horses' days were made numbered because of the cable car in San Francisco. We have Andrew Hallidie to thank for that. Have a great day.